Ladies and gentlemen, Masal al-Khair. I'm Jonathan Bloom, co-holder of the Hamad bin Khalifa Chair in Islamic Art at Virginia Commonwealth University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you tonight to the 6th Biennial Hamad bin Khalifa Symposium on Islamic Art. In a little bit, I'll tell you more about the history of the symposium. But first, I'd like to ask Akel Kahira, the Dean at VCU Qatar, to say a few words of welcome. Dr. Kahira, who is a specialist in the history and theory of culture, aesthetics, and design, as well as an architect, among other subjects, came to VCU this year from Clemson University. His accomplishments and publications are great, but for the purposes of this evening, I think his most notable achievement is that he was a fellow at the previous symposium held in Palermo long before he came to VCUQ. So I'd like to ask you to please welcome Dr. Akel Kahira.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, friends, and colleagues, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to By the Pen and What They Write, subtitle, Writing in Islamic Art and Culture, the 6th Biennial Hamad bin Khalifa Symposium on Islamic Art. This symposium, which is co-chaired by Drs. Sheila Blair and Jonathan Bloom, shared holders of the Hamad bin Khalifa Endowed Chair in Islamic Art History at VCU, was established in 2004. Over the last 10 years, the symposium has been held in Richmond, Virginia, in Doha, in Córdoba, Spain, and in Palermo, Italy. These symposia, which have addressed varied topics in the history of Islamic art and architecture and culture, including the role of color, of light, and now writing, have made an inordinate contribution to the field, not only by virtue of the quality of the presentations during the symposium, but also by virtue of the fact that the papers have delivered very carefully and have been carefully edited by Drs. Blair and Bloom, and subsequently published by Yale University Press. It is no exaggeration to say that the Hamad bin Khalifa Symposium on Islamic Art and Architecture has become the premier international conference on Islamic art and culture. We are delighted to co-host this symposium once again in Doha, a city that has rapidly developed an impressive cultural life and legacy. In essence, Doha is Dunya. And I can think of no better place for the symposium than this magnificent place and the building that you will see, the Islamic Museum, beginning tomorrow, is an extraordinary testimony to the importance of this subject. We are fortunate to collaborate with the Museum of Islamic Art and are committed to our partnerships with the Qatar museums to support the growth, distribution, and appreciation of Islamic art and culture. I would like to thank the Qatar Foundation for their continuous support, and of course, Her Highness Sheikha Moza bint Nasser for her extraordinary vision and leadership. On this 10th anniversary of the Hamad bin Khalifa Symposium on Islamic Art, I would like to welcome you all to By the Pen and What They Write. Thank you.
Thank you, Akel. Our next speaker, your next welcome, is going to be Joe Seipel, who is the Dean and Provost at VCU and I'm just looking why my slide is not moving. Here, because I'm pushing the wrong button. Okay. And Dean Seipel has been a faculty member at VCU for a very long time, and I'm not going to embarrass him by telling you how long he has been. But he has served as chairman of the sculpture department, senior associate dean, and director of graduate studies before being named dean in 2011. He's also a sculptor. Most recently, he has been intimately involved in the creation of the new Institute for Contemporary Art in Richmond, and that is scheduled to open at VCU in 2017, 2 years from now, and about which I will just hint that we may have a little bit more to say towards the end of the symposium. Please join me in welcoming Dean Joe Seipel.
I think just for a split second, Jonathan may have given me a promotion and called me provost. But I want to thank you. You're the first one to let me know about that. On behalf of VCU School of the Arts, VCU and President of VCU, Michael Rao, who could not be here today, I would like to welcome you to the 6th Biennial Hamad bin Khalifa Symposium on Islamic Art entitled By the Pen and What They Write. I also want to acknowledge our real provost, Dr. Gail Hackett, who is here and extends her welcome also. Under the leadership of His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani and His Highness Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, Father Emir of the State of Qatar, Qatar has become a leader in the study and preservation of the most beautiful and important artifacts of Islamic culture. The Museum of Islamic Art in Doha, designed by IMP, hosts one of the most impressive collections of Islamic art. I know that you're going to be incredibly impressed when you go to visit that wonderful institution. The museum, with the establishment of this museum and with the efforts of this symposium, Qatar continues to be an international center of education and scholarship in the field of Islamic art. In 1997, Her Highness Sheikh Mosa bin Nasser, chairperson of the Qatar Foundation, invited Virginia Commonwealth University School of the Arts to establish a campus in Qatar's education city. As the leading design program in the Middle East, the top-ranked public university arts and design program in the United States, it is apropos for VCU to launch and now become known for one of the world's leading scholarly venues for the study of Islamic art and culture through the biennial Hamad bin Khalifa Symposium on Islamic Art. I also want to extend a thank you to the chairs of our respective art history departments, Dr. Margaret Lindauer, who is here from the Richmond campus, chair of art history at that campus, and Dr. Dina Bangdel, the chair of art history here at our VCU Qatar campus. My special thanks go to our symposium organizers and joint holders of the Hamad bin Khalifa Endowed Chair in Islamic Art, Dr. Sheila Blair and Jonathan Bloom, who have not only once again brought together the greatest minds to discuss this topic at hand, but continue to raise the expectations of quality. I know we all look forward to the next couple of days. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I've been asked tonight to give you a little bit of history about the symposium, which titled 10 Years of the Hamad bin Khalifa Symposium. You'll see there's an asterisk there because it's actually 11. It's really started in 2004, and this year is 2015. As you've just heard, in 1997, Her Highness Sheikh Mosa bin Nasser Al Misnad invited the VCU School of the Arts to establish a campus in Qatar's education city. And a few years later, in recognition of VCU's role as the founding campus in Education City, His Highness Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, now Father Emir, then Emir of Qatar, endowed the Hamad bin Khalifa Chair in Islamic Art History within VCU's Department of Art History. In doing so, the Emir stipulated that the chair create a biennial international symposium on Islamic art. In 2004, Richard Toskin, VCU's vice provost and dean of the School of the Arts, asked Jim Farmer, chair of the VCU's art history department to organize the first symposium, even before the chair was established. Jim Farmer, who is a specialist in pre-Columbian art of the Americas, knowing nothing about Islamic art, remembered that he had just recently seen an article in the Art Bulletin all about Islamic art. This article was The Mirage of Islamic Art, Reflections on the Study of an Unwieldy Field, which the editor of the Art Bulletin, the major journal for art history in the United States, had asked us, Sheila Blair and me, Jonathan Bloom, to write in the aftermath of 9/11. Designed as an overview of the field for non-specialists, it was exactly what Jim Farmer needed, sort of a cheat sheet about Islamic art. So he picked up the phone and called us out of the blue. Following several email and telephone conversations, we helped him prepare a symposium called Expanded Frontiers that was held in early November of 2004 at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. It was designed to showcase different approaches to studying the history of Islamic art. The introduction was given by Jim Farmer. There was a keynote address by the late Oleg Grabar, and then there were talks by me, by Gulrun Yujipolu, Masume Farhad, Mohammed Zakaria, Nabil Safwat, Robert Hillenbrand, Oliver Watson, and closing remarks were given by Sheila Blair. I am delighted to say that both Masume and Sheila will be speaking again at this symposium, as will I. The symposium was followed by a tour of Richmond for many of the symposiasts. Here you see Sheila and Nabil Safwat, Robert Hillenbrand, and Mohammed Zakaria. The following year, VCU began a search for a scholar to appoint to the Hamad bin Khalifa chair, and in November of 2005, Sheila and I were offered the position to share. Our first symposium was held in Doha in November 2007 and concerned water. Our idea was to take subjects that were so obvious that people rarely talked about them. We chose our titles from Quranic verses or hadith that were appropriate to the subject and asked Mohammed Zakaria to do the calligraphy, which he has graciously and beautifully done ever since then. Our speakers came from around the world. They included Parveen Hassan from Bangladesh, Mohammed Al-Assad from Jordan, Linda Komaroff from Los Angeles, Marcus Milwright from Canada. There were some familiar faces, such as Nabil Safwat and Jim Farmer, who were there as well. And it represented what we were trying to do from the beginning, get a wide range of presenters with different approaches, trying to make the latest research and thought about important topics available to a wide general audience. One of our proudest achievements was the creation of the Hamad bin Khalifa Fellowships, which allowed deserving scholars, whether young or old, to attend the symposium. You know, it's wonderful to have these things, but if you can't come to hear them, it's really frustrating. And so this allowed people, wherever they were, to come. And over the years, we've had more than 70 fellows, and as you know, some have gone on to great things, like becoming Dean of VCU Qatar. And I'd like to just take a moment to give a round of applause to the fellows this year who are in the audience today, who have come from literally around the world. We took an excursion to the desert, and when I was putting this talk together, I sent out a picture that I found from this excursion of one of the speakers and her husband, which I don't think I'd sent to her before, and she wrote back in a recent email, and she said, "In your presentation, please tell people what fun the symposia are. Why can't scholarship also be such a pleasure?" And Sheila and I have really tried over this time to take these very important topics and to have great speakers and wonderful colleagues, but we also want to have fun. Because what we do, we love doing what we do, and we want to share our enthusiasm for it. The proceedings of the symposium were published 2 years later, in time for the next symposium, in a beautiful volume by Yale University Press called Rivers of Paradise. And at this moment, I should say that many, many people behind the scenes contributed to the success of the symposium and the publications. And this included the publisher at Yale University Press, Gillian Malpass, who cannot be with us today, the graphic designer at VCU, Teresa Engel, now Ilnicki, the master of all things technical, Andrew Ilnicki, who is still with us today, the book designer, Sarah Fawkes, VCU Arts Director of Communications, Dawn Waters, and of course, Marissa Brown, who makes everything happen as program manager. The third symposium was held in Córdoba, Spain in 2009 at the urging of Dr. Eugene Trani, who was then president of VCU, who had previously established a partnership with the University of Córdoba, and he said, let's take advantage of this and have the symposium there. Here you see at the symposium Dr. Abdullah bin Al-Thani from the Qatar Foundation, then Alison Van Stone, the Dean of VCU at Qatar, and Michael Rao, who was then recently installed as the new president of VCU. Again, our speakers and fellows came from around the world, and one of the most amusing and delightful events was at lunch in Córdoba. Here you see Muhammad Zakaria, was surrounded by several of his students and admirers, and he decided that he didn't like the calligraphy he'd done, and he wanted to make improvements on it. And so he took the cover of the program, and you can see he was improving on his own calligraphy. So these symposia are learning experiences for all of us. Again, we had excursions, and here we are in the Great Mosque or Cathedral of Córdoba, that we saw among other sites. And then 2 years later, the book Diverse Are Their Hues was published at the time of the next symposium. The fourth symposium was held here called God is Beautiful, He Loves Beauty, from a famous hadith. And it focused on the object in Islamic art and culture and was meant to celebrate the collection of the Museum of Islamic Art here in Doha, where we will, the next 2 days of the symposium will be held. So just remember this when you want to hear, don't come here tomorrow, but come to the museum. And which has, of course, assembled one of the most extraordinary collections of Islamic art. Our speakers, again, came from around the world. We protested wildly to the photographer about this idea of taking a picture from up on the balcony down at all of us, but it really manages to make us all look skinny, so that was really very nice. The symposium focused on the building. We had Paul Goldberger speak about IMP and the design of the building, and a dozen selected objects in it. Our fellows came from 5 continents. We even had a fellow from South America, I believe. Here you will recognize some familiar faces. And I should mention at this point that another really important thing that we feel is that we have included and encouraged students to participate both from VCU and VCUQ, as well as from other institutions. Here they are with Dina Bankdell, now the director of the art history program here at VCUQ. Another thing which we've done, and you will see tomorrow, is that we've asked students to introduce our speakers rather than having boring old tombstone introductions of so-and-so has written so many books and stuff like that. We have students who have to make up their own introductions. Once again, the team of Gillian Malpass and Sarah Fawkes produced an extraordinary book, and for some reason that picture did not come up. But it was published in time for the next symposium, which was in Palermo 2 years ago, which is called God is the Light of the Heavens and the Earth, Light in Islamic Art and Culture. It was held, the opening ceremony was held in a building not quite like this, in this magnificent Teatro Politeama. You can see, and the keynote speaker was the noted Iranian-American artist Shireen Neshat, who gave a mesmerizing talk. Here she is greeted by Leo Luca Orlando, the mayor of Palermo, with the rector of the university. And Marissa, of course, in the background, making sure everything went smoothly. We had receptions in the historic palazzi of Palermo, and we felt like characters out of Lampedusa's novel, The Leopard, in the sort of grand palazzi of Palermo. The proceedings of that symposium have just been published, and I show you, here is the actual book, and will soon be available. I'm sorry, we only have a few copies here today. They will be officially published later this month, but you can go on Amazon or on the Yale University website about finding how to order a copy. And this, I have to say, is an even more magnificent volume. It was published, as we have to say, just in time for this, the 6th symposium, that focuses on a subject that's very close to our hearts, Sheila and my hearts, that is on writing in Islamic art and culture. Over the course of the past 11 years, we've had 6 symposia, 72 speakers, 75 fellows from 6 continents. I haven't seen any penguins yet, but we're working on it. 4 publications, over 2,000 attendees. And what we're very, very excited about is over 9,000 podcast views in the last 4 years, and that isn't even including this year, which means that we're reaching out in yet another way to an entire audience. Obviously, this cannot be done without the help of lots of people, and here are some of their names that have helped out over the course of the past years. Now, let us turn to what you've all been waiting for, which is writing in Islamic art and culture, and our keynote speaker. At the first symposium in Richmond, Sheila Blair was the mistress of ceremonies, introducing the speakers and leading the panel discussion afterwards. Today, it is my very great pleasure to introduce her as the first and keynote speaker at this year's symposium here in Doha. As many of you know, we are not only the co-holders of the Hamad bin Khalifa Chair, but also longtime collaborators, husband and wife, and parents of 2 grown children who have grown as this symposium has proceeded. And I could amuse you, and I won't spend too much time telling you about the first time we came to Doha and the disasters that erupted at home while we were away. Together, we have written on many aspects of Islamic art and architecture, ranging from specialized studies to surveys, but Sheila has always been interested in the arts of writing over her long career. In 1992, she published a book on the monumental inscriptions of Iran and Transoxiana. In 1998, she published a handbook on Islamic epigraphy, or writing on buildings and objects. And in 2006, she published her best-selling book, Islamic Calligraphy, an introduction to and survey of the subject for people who may or may not know how to read Arabic script. The book was awarded the 2008 World Prize for the Book of the Year from the Islamic Republic of Iran, receiving the award from then-President Ahmadinejad. Although you can see he did not shake her hand with her, as he did with all the men who received prizes. So I ask you tonight to all give our hands to our keynote speaker, Sheila Blair, who is going to speak tonight on writing as a signifier of Islam.
Thank you, Jonathan. Ooh, you don't see anything here. You are blackness, folks. So if you're not hearing me or seeing me, I won't know because I'm just here in a pitch black fog up here. Anyway, I am delighted to be here. This is, as you've heard from Jonathan, the subject that is closest to my academic heart, the field of writing and how people read. And I think of that because Islam is a religion built on words. The central miracle of the faith is that God sent down a series of revelations to the Prophet Muhammad in the early 7th century CE. They were delivered piecemeal in Arabic over the course of several decades. And so to ensure an accurate recension, Muhammad's companions and his followers had these oral revelations collected and transcribed as a book known as the Quran, literally a recitation or a reading. Scholars are vigorously, even vehemently, debating how long it took to effect this change from spoken and heard to written and read. And if you'll notice, there is a question mark about the date of this particular page and great fights in the academic community about it. In any case, most people agree that fine codices of the Quran with stately calligraphy and colorful illumination were produced within a century of the Prophet's death in 632 CE. As Islam expanded to regions beyond the Arabic-speaking world, many vernacular languages came to be written in Arabic script. The first was New Persian, little red star on the map. Then a host of others, both Semitic and non-Semitic languages used from the Atlantic, and Al-Khamiado is Spanish written in Arabic script, to the Pacific. The Austronesian languages of Sulu and Malay are all written in Arabic script. The result is that Arabic script, after Roman script, is the segmental script most frequently used in the world today. Religion played a major role in the spread of Arabic script. The prestige of Arabic as the language of the revelation undoubtedly encouraged the use of the script in which it was written. But part of the reason for the swift and widespread adoption of Arabic script was also its flexibility, as extra dots and strokes can be added to the consonantal system to represent virtually any sound. Writing in Arabic script, as a result, permeated the cultures in which Islam flourished. I'm just going to do a little adjustment to my screen here. Inscriptions wrapped buildings, religious and secular, exterior and interior. And here you see a building, a mosque in Cairo, inscription on the exterior, versus a house in Damascus, poetic inscriptions in Ottoman on the interior. Inscriptions adorned objects, both quotidian, like this little oil lamp, and precious, like this nephrite or jade jug made for the Timurid ruler Ulugh Beg. Inscribed fabrics cloaked people, both living and dead. And here you see the frontispiece showing a robe worn by the ruler Badruddin Lutlu, who is identified by tiraz bands with his name. Even the dead were wrapped with inscribed bands. Here are bodies exhumed in the 1930s in the Kharafa cemetery in Cairo, and they have inscribed textiles laid over their eyes. The potency of Arabic script as a symbol of Islam was so strong that Arabic script has been appreciated even in places that maintained local systems of writing, such as China. Although Muslims had arrived in the region as early as the 7th century, much of the conversion to Islam took place from the Ming period onward, after Sufi preachers from Central Asia had introduced the faith to many areas of north-central China. And here you see just a selection of the mosques that have been built since the Ming period in north-central China, and I owe this map to a forthcoming book by my colleague Nancy Steinhardt on mosques in China. Muslims in China followed many local traditions. In architecture, for example, builders over the millennia had worked out a flexible system of construction using ceramic tile, pillars, beams, and bracket sets that interlocked with the pillars below or the beams above. Such systems were regularly used for large halls, erected for a wide variety of purposes, from residences and palaces to Buddhist and Taoist temples, Confucian funerary halls, and the like. Muslims readily adopted the same system of construction for the prayer halls in their congregational mosques. And from the street, it is extremely difficult to determine the function of any particular structure, as here at the Great East Mosque in the largest mosque in the city of Kaifeng in Henan province. So to alert visitors to the building's function as mosque, a calligrapher painted panels inscribed with Quranic verses on either side of the porch. The panel to the right, shown here, has verse 108 of Surah At-Tawbah, saying that God loves those who purify themselves. The inscription on the Kaifeng Mosque is executed with an extremely fluid line, written with a brush, typical implement used for Chinese calligraphy, not with a reed pen, the typical tool in the Islamic lands. The flowing line and the piling up of the letters in the Kaifeng inscription make it difficult to read the text. And so, the calligrapher added a caption in Arabic characters with the numbers in Roman script of the chapter, here called a sutra, following local tradition, and a verse. Seeing Arabic script was likely more significant to the viewer than reading the particular text that was written there. The importance of the visual impact, in addition to the meaning or semantic of texts, holds true in a different context in another Arabic inscription in China. This one on a sweet shop outside the Congregational Mosque in Hohat, capital of the Inner Mongolian Autonomous Region. Most of the signs are in Chinese characters, but the small oval in the center is written in Arabic letters. It reads, Al-Matam al-Islami, Islamic food, indicating that the food is halal, permissible for Muslims. The two words, however, are written incorrectly with separate letters in their independent positions. Vendor and buyers of his products may not have been able to read the text, but the readability of the words was less important than the presence and the visual aspect of Arabic script. Writing in Arabic script became such a potent symbol of Islam that its visual power was clear even to its enemies, who sometimes adapted pseudo-Arabic to symbolically affirm the identity and the alterity of Islam. We can see this at the monastery of Hosvius Lucas in central Greece, the most complete and therefore one of the most important monastic assemblies of medieval Byzantium. The site commemorates the grave of a local saint, Luke, who died in 953. He was known best for foretelling the Byzantine conquest of Crete, a victory achieved in 961, less than a decade after his death. At that time, a coalition of interested parties, both local and imperial, founded the smaller building on the north as a victory church to mark the fulfillment of his prophecy and to commemorate the fame that its fulfillment had brought to the local community. All four sides of this small cross-in square, church are inscribed with bricks with pseudo-inscriptions in Arabic. The inscriptions are particularly numerous on the south facade, the side from which the pilgrims approached and the one with the apse. So you see them right here on the building. The pseudo-inscriptions function as a sign of the Byzantine triumph over their Muslim foes, and also as an atropaic motif that demarcates the boundaries and protects the sacred spaces of the church. The ubiquitous use of Arabic writing in the lands where Islam flourished is well known as well documented, as we're going to see in many different ways over the next 2 days, when speakers will address topics about writing in Islamic art and culture, ranging from its roots in pre-Islamic Arabia and the references to writing in the Quran, to its spread to East and Southeast Asia, from the writing of history to the making and selling of books, from Arabic typography to contemporary calligraphy. What I want to do tonight, to open a conference devoted to Islamic art and culture, is to go one step further and show how this ubiquitous use of Arabic script affected ways of seeing. That is, how form is intricately connected with and often enhances meaning. Like the topics of these conferences that are intended to address broad themes like water, color, light, let me begin with a point that's very obvious, but often overlooked. Writing engenders direction. Scripts are written, but even more importantly, read in one direction. In the case of Arabic, from right to left. Books, therefore, open in the opposite way that they do in the West, as here with the juz or volume from a 30-volume Quran made in Marageh in northwest Iran. Like many manuscripts, the opening left-hand page is decorated with a rosette or sunburst, known in Arabic as a shamsa, from the Arabic word for sun, a shams. Such a device is not new. It had been used already in pre-Islamic times in Byzantine manuscripts, such as the famous Codex of Dioscorides, De Materia Medica, made in 512. In the case of the Byzantine copy of Dioscorides, the rosette incorporates a picture of the patron, the Princess Juliana Anicia, daughter of the emperor. But in the case of the manuscripts made in the Islamic lands, pictures are replaced by words. The volume of the Quran made at Marageh, like many other Quran manuscripts, is inscribed with the Quranic phrase that none shall touch it except those who are clean. The verse is often accompanied by the following one, that it, meaning the Quran, is ascending down from the Lord of all being, a reference to the central miracle of Islam. In other types of manuscripts made in the Islamic lands, especially deluxe copies made on order for important patrons, the sunburst is often used for the ex libris and contains the name rather than the picture, of the patron. As books became increasingly lavish from the 14th century onwards, so did the dedicatory rosettes, often bracketed above and below by bands or cartouches. A particularly fine example is the dedicatory page from the lamentably dispersed copy of the Shahnameh made for Shah Tahmasp in the early 16th century. Everything about the manuscript bespeaks its royal patronage, from its large size, it's about 1/2 meter tall, to its gold-flecked margins and its 250 almost full-page illustrations. The dedicatory page contains equally laudatory titles for the patron. The cartouche above invokes the name of God, and the text in the rosette continues that the book was commissioned for the library of the most magnificent sultan, the most just and beneficent Haqqan, Sultan, son and grandson of sultans, Abu Muzaffar Sultan Shah Tahmasp, of Husseini and Safavi descent, Bahadur. May God the most exalted perpetuate his reign and his rule and diffuse his justice and his beneficence throughout the world. As books became increasingly fancy, so did the front matter. Fine Quran manuscripts had double pages of illumination. But other texts, notably poetry, had double-page frontispieces with figural scenes showing the patron. Like the written texts, they have to be read from right to left. A prime example is shown here, this copy of Sadi's Bustan, made for the Timurid ruler Sultan Hussein at Herat in 1488. Although smaller than the Shahnameh, everything is equally fancy. It was penned by Sultan Ali Mashhadi, one of the most renowned calligraphers of the day. It has gold and lapis lazuli illumination by Yari, one of the rare illuminators to sign his work. The text contains 4 paintings by Behzad, the only signed works by the most famous of Persian painters. The double-page frontispiece is equally elaborate, and like most of the manuscript, replete with allusion, puns, and even jokes. The viewer needs to begin at the right of the frontispiece. At the bottom is a portal that serves as entrance to the courtyard, as architecture, and the painting as illustration. Outside the portal, a doorkeeper canes a beggar who seeks entry, perhaps an allusion to the cruel and unjust world that lies beyond the court of the ruler who is supposed to be wise and just. Inside the portal lies the outer courtyard of the palace. Servants there are providing food and drink for a celebration, although some participants seem to have overindulged a bit already. The viewer's gaze continues to the left side of the painting, showing the inner side of the courtyard. One enters through another doorway, framing a courtier who bows and gestures toward the figures seated on the carpet. The seated figure on the far left is clearly the patron Sultan Hussein. Contemporary texts mention his distinctive dress in red and green silk and how he tied his turban in 3 folds with a plume nodding over it. The same seated figure occurs in contemporary images, including one detached from an album labeled Portrait, Surat, of Sultan Hussein Mirza and assigned to the painter Behzad. In the frontispiece, the Sultan extends a flower, perhaps an allusion to the sacred flowers invoked by the poem's name, Bustan, a walled garden, but perhaps also an allusion to the flowers offered by important Buddhist patrons, like the Uyghur prince depicted at Bezeklik in the Xinjiang region of China. Sultan Hussein offers the flower to a youth in a blue robe who extends his right hand to accept it, but also nods his head, perhaps shyly acknowledging the gesturing servant. Could he represent the author Saadi, or perhaps one of the Sultan's many sons? And I welcome any suggestions anyone from the audience might offer me here. The figure in the green robe is further identified as Sultan because he's seated under a royal tent, complete with lattice and awning. The tent is decorated with a roundel that evokes the rosette used for the ex libris in manuscripts. It asks for blessing on the Sultan. O God, make the reign of the most magnificent Sultan, Abul Ghazi Sultan Hussein Bahadur Khan, last forever. Unless the viewer missed the point about the princely commission, the Sultan's given name, Sultan Hussein, is highlighted in gold. The double-page frontispiece, then, must be red as an encomium to the patron, just like the benedictory inscription that it encloses. The whole scene depicts one of the literary soirees, a majlis, at which the Sultan and his courtiers traded intricate jokes, often veiled in literary allusions, and the contemporary viewer, reading it from right to left, would have understood all those visual allusions as well. But it's not only paintings that can be read like text. Writing engenders direction on 3-dimensional objects as well. The courses of inscribed bricks at the monastery of Hosius Lucas exert a lateral pull, encouraging pilgrims to circumambulate the structure, which was originally freestanding. Similarly, visitors need to turn portable objects in a clockwise direction to read the imagery on them. Such imagery need not be narrative, but position does convey preeminence. A case in point, drawn from another place and another time, 5 centuries earlier than the Timurid frontispiece and the opposite side of Eurasia, is this large box known as the Pamplona casket. It was one of some 24 ivory boxes still surviving from the Iberian Peninsula and dated between the mid-10th and mid-11th century. Some are small, others like this one large. It's the biggest, about 1/3 of a meter across. Some are cylindrical with domed lids, others rectangular with flat or pyramidal lids. Some are monolithic, carved from a single tusk, others, like this one, assembled from multiple plaques of ivory. But despite the variations of size, shape, and technique of construction, all but one share a common trait. They have a large inscription band carved in relief at the base of the lid. The inscriptions regularly begin at the same place, here at the front on the right corner. Some texts contain names and dates, and like most Arabic inscriptions describing the foundation of a building or the commissioning of an object, they list the participants hierarchically, beginning with the most important, the ruler or patron, followed in descending order by other names, such as the recipient, the supervisor of the work, and the date. And sorry to say to all of you who are artists here, the artist comes at the very end, if at all. The text, for instance, on this box, evokes blessing and long life on the emir I'm going to go back one, Abdul Malik ibn al-Mansur. And pride of place in the decoration goes to the polylobed medallion on the right front. Its shape already evoking the shamsa used as the ex libris in a manuscript. It shows a bearded figure who has many caliphal attributes. Seated on a platform throne borne by lions, he holds the rod-like scepter of the Neo-Umayyads and wears the regnal seal on his left hand. Flanking him stand two servants, the one on the right proffering a fly whisk, the one on the left holding a perfume bottle. But interestingly, the seated figure is not the Caliph al-Hisham, who had assumed the throne as a boy and was a mere figurehead. Rather, the bearded figure must be, as Sophie Macario has shown, the patron of the box, Abdul Malik, who here is asserting caliphal privilege by using regnal attributes of throne, scepter, and seal. Furthermore, text and image on the ivory casket tell us that Abdul Malik controlled the caliphal workshops. The foundation inscription around the lid says work was carried out under the hands, literally ala yadai, of the page Zubair, who bears his master's family epithet, al-Amidi. The artisan who carved the plaque signed it in such a way as to play off the foundation inscription. Unlike the foundation inscription at the top, that was planned out in advance and carved in relief around the base of the lid, this inscription is added to an already finished work, incised in the ivory. Furthermore, the inscription is cleverly moved so that it is not in the center of the platform throne. The center would be, a little bit to the left, but rather it is directly under the foot of the patron. The artist Misbah here is signing his work in order to pun on the director of the workshop. He is under the foot of his patron, as opposed to the supervisor who's merely under his hands. Reading the pictures then, along with the words, underscores the aspirations of the patron and his control of the caliphal workshops. Large and fancy works of art, like this spectacular ivory box, were not run-of-the-mill objects, but rather special commissions that required much time and effort to plan the decoration on them. Reading the inscriptions, not just what they say, but also where they are and how they are written, can help us to understand the function of the object on which they are inscribed. As here, with this monumental incense burner in the shape of a feline, whether lion, caracal, or lynx. It stands over 85 centimeters high, like that. Almost life-size, the granddaddy of more than a score of similar examples. These large incense burners are all cast with a separate head that can be removed or tipped back to place a dish with coals and incense inside. They have a pierced body and neck so that the scented smoke can escape and perfume the air. Several still have their turquoise-colored eyes intact. All are attributed to Eastern Iran or Afghanistan during the 11th and 12th centuries, and the inscriptions on this one are the key to localizing the group. It bears a large foundation inscription. Like that on the Pamplona casket, this one is carefully planned. It begins in the back center, just below the vertical stripe down its neck, and rings the base of the head. The text says it was ordered by the wise and just emir, and it continues below with his name and titles, decorating his chest like a large pectoral or necklace right across. The text is cleverly designed to fit the space exactly. The upper line contains his honorific and his given name, Saifuddin Muhammad, with the large wa of his title, Sword of the Religion of the World and Religion, falls right in the middle. It has a large upsweeping tail that curls like a pointing finger, pointing to his name Muhammad, which is cleverly fitted around the shoulder. The patron's nisba, or epithet al-Mawardi, fills the line below, again carefully aligned with the one above. The foundation inscription continues to the right and left below the side bosses. Like the one visible in the front here, the side bosses contain auspicious blessings, happiness, prosperity, and well-being. The text below has the name of the artist who made it, Jafar ibn Muhammad ibn Ali, and the one on the left has the date, 577, corresponding to 1181-82. Contemporary chronicles do not mention the patron, Saifuddin Muhammad al-Mawardi. But looking closely at the inscription and how it is written can give us clues as to who he was, why he ordered this object, and how it was used. The inscription calls him an emir, some sort of military commander, and his martial activities are borne out by his title, Sword of the State and Religion. He was clearly rich to commission such a large object, and his epithet al-Mawardi suggests why a wealthy soldier would have wanted to do so. It refers to a maker and seller of rosewater, a specialized profession that combines what we think of as pharmacist and perfumer. Rosewater was part of proper etiquette, sprinkled on the hands, feet, body, and clothes, and offered to guests. At least from the 9th century onward, rosewater was used in tandem with incense in both palaces and private homes. In ordering this incense burner, the patron may well have reflected his family income from the trade in both substances. But we can go further if we imagine how this large incense burner would have been used. Remember, it stands like that. It would have stood on the floor, presumably in the patron's reception hall. Diners and visitors sat in a circle on the floor, as here in this scene of a wedding banquet depicted in a contemporary copy of Al-Khariri's Maqamat. The inscriptions across the lion's chest with his epithet al-Mawardi, the rosewater seller, would have been exactly at eye level, and the bold and largely written text would have magnified his generosity as host, one of the duties incumbent upon Muslims. The contemporary theologian al-Ghazali devotes a whole section of his masterwork on Islamic teaching, the revival of religious sciences, Ihya Ulumuddin, to manners pertaining to food. Ghazali quotes a range of sources to underscore the importance of hospitality for Muslims. He cites a hadith in which the Prophet, when asked, "What is faith?" replies, "Faith was the giving of food and the exchange of greetings." The inscription on this large and showy object would have not only called attention to the emir's name and wealth, but also magnified his munificence and his piety in offering such hospitality. we can see just how deliberately the inscription on this large incense burner was planned to augment the emir's name and statue as wealthy and pious Muslim by contrasting it to another in the Cleveland Museum of Art. In size, the one in Cleveland is more typical. It's about 36 centimeters, a third of a meter, and weighs 18 pounds, less than half the size of the one in the Metropolitan. And I sized the pictures here so you get some sense. The Cleveland incense burner also has a single inscription, a band running around the base of the neck and top of the body. It contains a Quranic text. Verses 9 and 10 from chapter 62, the Surah of Congregation. And the verses describe the obligation of Friday prayer. These Quranic verses are typically used to decorate congregational mosques. And I'm giving you an example here of the dome chamber in the Congregational Mosque at Varameen, south of Tehran, which has exactly the same verses about the obligation of Friday prayer. The same verses fall on an underglaze painted mihrab dated 1319 in the Museum of Islamic Art in Cairo. The use of these verses about Friday prayer on the incense burner in Cleveland leave no doubt that it too was intended to be used in a mosque. Although many Muslims today do not burn incense in mosques and shrines, they did so regularly in medieval times. Textual examples range from the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem in the 10th century to Ottoman mosques in the 16th, some of which were provided with a bahurcu, a specialist responsible for both purchasing and burning incense. Muslims in China still use large incense burners, as here at the Great Kuba in Lingjia. There's no question, and further inscribed with the profession of faith here at the right, there is no question that this incense burner in China was specifically made for the tomb, for it bears inscriptions not only in Chinese, but here with the profession of faith on the right. The bold Quranic inscription around the neck of the incense burner in Cleveland provide material proof that Muslims burned incense in congregational mosques in eastern Iran or Afghanistan circa 1200, even using a zoomorphic or animal-shaped object. Some scholars have explained the occurrence of these verses about Friday prayer on the incense burner in Cleveland as mere chance. This is not possible. For the selection of Quranic verses to decorate objects was deliberate and meaningful, as shown by one final example that illustrates how placement and style enhance the meaning of these Quranic texts. My example here is the spectacular minbar, once in the Koutoubia Mosque in Marrakesh. It's a large wooden structure measuring almost 4 meters in height, so twice human size. Each side is decorated with a geometric pattern exactly coordinated to the stepped profile, with strapwork bands of micro-mosaic separating nearly 1,000 panels, deeply carved with designs on several levels. The small panels come in 3 shapes and 3 woods. Each side has 216 of the Ys with the forked ends. Those are the sort of spaceship-looking ones at the top, made of jujube wood. Each side has 128 8-pointed stars, the one in the middle, made of African blackwood, and I think you can see on the slide on the right how black the blackwood is. And each side has 127 elongated hexagons made of boxwood. A long inscription band runs along the stepped edge and down a vertical strip at the back. In technique, the inscription is even more complicated than the rest of the decoration. The letters, in a broad angular script, are cut out from boxwood, outlined in white bone, and inlaid on a marquetry ground of checkerboard squares. The script displays the hand of a master calligrapher as the designs are worked out with sophisticated fluidity and elegance. And furthermore, the panels are tilted to better display the surface on which the inscription lies and make it even more visible to the viewer. The texts on both sides of the minbar contain long Quranic passages. The right side has verses 54-61 from chapter 7, beginning that God created the world in 6 days and then sat on his throne. And the word used for throne here is al-arsh. The left side has verses 255-57 from chapter 2. The text begins with a well-known throne verse, Ayatul Kursi, the Quran's most eloquent evocation of God's majesty and power, that ends with the eponymous phrase that God's throne, and the word here is kursi, extends over the heavens and the earth. The text on the side ends, interestingly, with verse 257 about God who brings believers from darkness into light, an appropriate phrase for a minbar that was pulled weekly from a shadowy closet into the light of the mosque. The two Quranic texts on this magnificent minbar, each using a different word for the throne of God who brings light, were meant to be read together with the physical object, a tall, throne-like pulpit from which the imam delivered the sermon in the mosque, thereby enlightening the worshippers there. The foundation texts, furthermore, were designed to coordinate with the Quranic verses about the minbar as throne. A first historical inscription, uncovered only during conservation in the 1990s, descends along the vertical strip at the back of the left. It says that the minbar was crafted in Cordova for the Congregational Mosque in Marrakesh, and that work was begun on the 1st of Muharram, New Year's Day, of 532, corresponding to September 19, 1137. A complementary text crowns the cavetto at the top of the backrest, indicated by the arrow here. It's executed in a different technique, relief carving, and much damaged, probably from where, as shown in this contemporary painting, where the sermon would have been given from the top of the minbar, and sitting against it, the imam would have damaged the minbar. The text across the top of the backrest repeats the same information, that the minbar was made in Cordova for this venerated congregational mosque, but gives the date the work was finished, although unfortunately, that part of the inscription is damaged, so we don't know what the date was. A third text, squeezed on the impost blocks of the backrest, invokes God's assistance on the Prince of Muslims, Ali ibn Yusuf ibn Tashfin, and after him, his designated heir. In other words, the foundation texts tell us that in 1137, the Almoravid Sultan Ali ibn Yusuf ordered the minbar from Cordova as a sort of New Year's present for the new congregational mosque in his capital, Marrakesh. This huge construction, remember it's twice human height, made in pieces, must have been transported 1,500 kilometers, about 900 miles, from Cordova to Marrakesh, first floated down the Guadalquivir, then shipped along the tip of the Iberian Peninsula and across the Straits of Gibraltar, and finally toted on the back of pack animals over the Atlas Mountains to the Sultan's capital at Marrakesh. Every aspect of the inscriptions on this extraordinary work were meant to underscore the authority of the Almoravid Sultan. The Quranic texts down the side play upon the image of minbar as God's throne from which he brings light. Foundation texts continue that analogy, suggesting that the Sultan and his heirs were the rightful occupants on that throne as God's representatives on earth. The text crammed on the impost blocks to contain the Sultan's full name and genealogy was not just a eulogy, Rather, it reflects the official formula used in the khutbah, the sermon that would have been preached from the throne-like minbar every Friday in the Almoravid capital. The minbar thus proclaims the Almoravid Sultan as religious and political leader of the community. By ordering it from Cordova for his capital in Marrakesh, the Sultan was deliberately staking out his territorial domains, from the Sierra Morena in the north to the Atlas Mountains in the south. These varied examples show that writing in Arabic script permeates Islamic art and culture. They are, in other words, a signifier, following Ferdinand de Chaussere's original definition of the physical form or outward manifestation of meaning. Writing carries content in the words, but it also imparts meaning by direction, placement, and form. Several conclusions follow from this observation. First, the viewer does not need to be able to read Arabic script to recognize its presence and appreciate its value, as in the Quranic passage on the mosque in Kaifeng. Second, the inscription does not even have to be readable, as in the case of the inscriptions on the market in Khohat, or the pseudo-Kufic on the monastery at Hosius Lucas. And third, Arabic script held power from the earliest centuries of Islam and continues to do so today, as shown by one very recent example, the Ismaili Center in Toronto that opened just over a year ago in September 2014. According to the organization's website, the architect Charles Correa intended, and I quote, to create a building that responds to the traditions of Islamic architecture in a contemporary design using modern materials, end quote. The Jamaat-Haneh, or prayer hall, has a corbelled ceiling designed to recall the vaulting traditions of Islamic architecture, and one might add here that he designed a ceiling designed to display God's light-giving power. Particularly relevant, however, for this paper and this conference on writing is the interior decoration. The walls of the prayer hall that you see here are lined with Canadian maple paneling. And if you look closely, those of you who read Arabic will see that they repeat the word Allah in stylized Kufic. The word reverberates here. And the white walls in other spaces are decorated with calligraphic panels, typically executed in local materials such as maple, oak, and other woods. In form, this panel recalls the shamsa, or sunburst, used for the ex libris in a manuscript. And the content? Squares of Arabic script with sacred names revolving around a central Allah reflect the preeminence of writing in Islamic art and culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. I know she has agreed to take a few questions. So if there are any questions from the audience, it's going to be very difficult. I'm going to move away from here. But and we have microphones, 2 microphones. So if anybody would like to ask a question, we have a few moments for questions. Don't be shy. It's free.
No one's going to tell me who they think the seated person in that very famous frontispiece are. Barbara Brand, you're here and you've written about this, and I can't figure out the
Stay by this microphone.
Barbara Brand, you're here, you've written about this frontispiece. Who do you think the nodding figure next to Sultan Hussein, to whom he offers the flower, is?
Thank you. Well, I rather think that's an anon. I think that's a young gentleman friend, perhaps.
Oh,
But,
even adding to our...
But I think that in the outer courtyard, there is a prince sitting on a sort of tuffet, looking rather disagreeable, and I think that may be Badi'a-Zaman.
I have read what you've written, and I wondered if he was, in this case, the Sultan was offering the flower and thereby the lineage to a younger son, whom he preferred apparently to his older son, Badi Zaman.
It might be so.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes, I don't know.
speculation is rife in this manuscript and our field.
Thank you.
Thank you for your speech.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for an excellent and well-illustrated paper. Just wanted to know your opinion about certain notable exceptions to the use of Arabic script as a signifier of Islam. First of all, of course, we have the large Christian Arabic using communities. I mean, you showed an inscription on a monastery, the Greek monastery there, but that was, as you said, was a pseudo inscription. But of course, Arabic script was used, real Arabic script, readable Arabic script was used both in inscriptions and on manuscripts throughout the Christian Arab communities over many centuries in the Mashriq, Egypt and the Mashriq. That's one thing. But looking at it from the other point of view, there are also large Muslim communities which don't use the Arabic script. One thinks particularly of say, Bengal in eastern India, which tens of millions of Muslims there, but as far as I'm aware, they've never used the Arabic script normally for their language, which has always been written in Nagari script. So I wonder if they don't invalidate anything you've said, but nevertheless, it may be worth pointing out that these exceptions both ways do exist.
Right. I've never been to Africa to see the mosques built by these people. Do they use Arabic on their mosques? It would surprise me if they didn't, but I'm always open to new information.
In Africa, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I presume so, yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Bengal in eastern India,
Yeah.
where there are tens of thousands tens of millions, I think, of Muslims living there. But as far as I know, they don't use the Arabic script. Do they?
Right.
Not in manuscripts anyway.
I mean, in China, they don't use the Arabic script either, except in these cases on.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
So
another
there are
example.
many places where Arabic was not adopted for the vernacular language.
Yes.
But as we all know, for every rule we make, there's always an exception.
Yes.
So just to respond to that question about Africa, I grew up in Kenya, and Arabic was not used as a language, but the Arabic script was used on the mosques, and the local language on the coast in East Africa was Swahili, which is a mixture of Arabic and the local languages.
Yeah.
So I would add from here. Hello? Hello?
Oh, okay. No, we're looking over. This is the problem.
So I've
We
got a
can't
mic
see
here.
Thing over here. Yes.
All right, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering, with the advent of digital and keyboards and touches, what do you think the future of Arabic script and writing is going towards, or could be going towards?
I think, if anything, Arabic has become if we can say this by mixing our metaphors, an even stronger signifier of Islam when we see now that many modern artists, their definition of making what they like to call Islamic calligraphy or Islamic art is to incorporate Arabic words into their art. We're going to see from Nasser Salim how they use it in neon art today. In terms of digital and typography, we have a real problem here, in that I don't think that typographers, and we're going to hear from Hudda Abi Faris on this subject, have caught up with the challenges of writing Arabic script in a font that adheres to digital rules. How can I put this? So I was struck when we came on the airplane today over here on Qatar Air. They have these beautiful brochures they hand out that are Arabic on one side and English on the other side, and the Arabic is almost unreadable because they've decided they have to have a font that has a flat baseline like English. And for those of us who know how to read Arabic as hand form, it's almost impossible to read. So I think it's a wide open field, and I urge all of you who are doing digital things to figure out a way to come by this. But I think it will be an even stronger chord for many Muslims.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Hello.
one in the middle
Hello.
here. Yeah, yeah.
Hi. I had a question about one of the Persian manuscripts that you showed at the beginning. The people had a line through them, and I was wondering
Yes.
why that was.
That's the copy of the Maqamat that's in Leningrad. They have all been symbolically decapitated, dehumanized by a later reader who didn't want, like the Taliban in Bamiyan, to blow up the thing, to destroy the manuscript. But he felt uncomfortable about the figural depictions. So in the same way that some people deface figures and just remove the face but leave the rest of the figure, so someone went through every single figure in that manuscript and drew a black line, rather slapdash, in a slapdash fashion, through the necks to decapitate them, but leaving the picture, and they still serve as some of our best medieval evidence, or evidence for medieval social life.
Thank you.
It's on.
Hello?
Yeah.
Thanks for a lovely lecture. My question is about the incense burner. Why is it so big? That's my first question. My second question is, if you're sitting down, cross-legged, and the incense burner is somewhere in the room, would it be easy for the people sitting around it to read the inscription?
Well, the interesting part is that his name, and al-Mawardi, is by far the biggest part of the inscription, which is right here here on the incense burner. So it is pretty much eye level on when you're sitting on the floor. You can't try it out because it's in the Metropolitan Museum and they've displayed it so you don't bang into it on a podium.
Yeah. So it's very well thought of.
I mean, he
very well thought through.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't haphazard that his name comes out exactly like that, symmetrically aligned like that. Why it's so big? I presume that size, like even today, is designed to indicate that you are rich and have a lot of money to throw around. Watches? Oh, like big watches, like the people who wear these enormous watches. So he has this enormous incense burner that's really going to knock people off their feet when they come in to have dinner. And at the same time, since hospitality is such a duty incumbent upon Muslims, he's being a Muslim, but he's an edgy Muslim.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for this wonderful presentation. I'm here. Okay.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I was wondering while you were presenting, and you have shown the pseudo inscription on the church, and as you know, in Italian Renaissance, using the pseudo cuffing inscriptions, especially for saints and the Virgin Mary, was quite common. So my question is, do you think that Christians in the Renaissance were aware of the value of Islamic script as a signifier of Islam and wanted to use it as a signifier of Christianity?
Well, certainly the people who built the Byzantine church, the Byzantine monastery at Hostius Lucas, were aware, I think, of the power of writing and knew that that was pseudo-writing. They were imitating writing. When we get to the whole idea of the hemline of mantles in Italian paintings, I'm less sure, and there's even a whole argument now that this is not Arabic script, but that some of it is a Central Asian language written there, Pagspa. Clearly, Christian patrons didn't care about Arabic script, because all of those ivory boxes that we have preserved from Spain are only preserved because they were changed from being Muslim objects into Christian reliquaries and preserved in churches. And in a few cases, they took the Arabic inscription off. But in many cases, like the Pamplona casket, they wrapped the relics of Saint so-and-so and so-and-so, I can't remember, inside this box that has a huge Arabic inscription on them. They didn't care. And they even used textiles that have Arabic inscriptions on them to wrap the bones of Christian saints. That's the Suaire de Saint-Just in the Louvre. So Christians were not deterred by it in all cases. Some of them seem to have known what it was.
Thank you.
Well, let us again give a hand to our keynote speaker, and let me encourage you all to come to the symposium tomorrow morning, and on Monday morning. We will begin at 8:30 to 4 p.m. at the Museum of Islamic Art. If you haven't registered already, please, 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 if you can, go on the web and register at www.islamicartdoha, all one word, .org, because space is limited in the auditorium of the museum, as you know, and those who have registered will be admitted. It would be more difficult to get in at the last minute. Again, thank you all for coming, and we will hope to see you all tomorrow morning at 8:30.